Hello, hello.
Oh, it's good to be back, Matt.
Yes, it is. Yes. How are you? Amy, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's awesome. It's our pleasure. I absolutely love this show for us because we get to talk to some of the most interesting people in the world, and the topics go like completely all over the place. And I cannot wait to talk to today.
You know, I'll tell this. Matt and I, like, we're on a bunch of sites where they like look for guests, and sometimes the pitches are like out there and they're horrible, and then other times they're out there and you're like, oh yeah, this is us. And I feel like this is one of those.
Yeah. We talk about a lot of you talk about a lot of stuff I like: sex, food. I mean, yes.
Who doesn't need those two things?
Yeah, exactly.
I get a lot of yeses when I reach out to shows. Everybody wants to talk about food and sex. It's an easy sell.
So yeah,
good niche.
As the on-ramp, if you will, to the food and sex part, like, let's just hear a little bit about how you got here. I'd love to. It's kind of a very interesting and, dare I say, very niche market. I'd love to know how you landed here. Just if you want to start there, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So it really started with, in my early 20s, I got really sick. And it took a long time to figure out what was going on. During that time, I lost an incredible amount of weight. I'm almost 5'9", and I was like 90 pounds.
Oof.
Ow.
Yeah. And so finally, I was diagnosed with the least sexy thing ever, a systemic yeast infection combined with a severe mold allergy. And the treatment for both, it's a fairly similar treatment, and it's pretty awful. It's just drastic changes in diet. And it was the most restrictive diet you could probably ever imagine. But I started feeling better within days.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was almost instantaneous. And it was just so profound to me how much just changing your diet could impact your health and just your everything, your productivity, your relationships with other people. So...
And you know what? You're not even like the fifth person that we've talked to that has had a very similar genesis story, both from the mold and some kind of illness that
chronic
shook people
systemic
to the
thing.
core.
Yeah.
Made them
you know what's also
hard
funny? We I think everyone rationally gets that what we put into our body affects the outcome, right? Yet. I say this in my clinic all the time. I don't tend to give nutritional advice, and it's not that I don't have some experience with it or training. It's literally, I could convert you to a different religion before I could get you to like give up certain foods and say, no, this is how we're going to eat.
It's true. So my approach, what happened from there was I was actually working as a wine writer, and I wanted to write more about food as well. And I discovered the topic of aphrodisiacs, and it really fit with that, this belief that I have that eating, that your food choice is just so profoundly important to everything that you do. And it connected so much for me because I knew this was a good way to reach other people too, without them having to go through what I did. But to say that, you're going to have better sex if you make some of these food choices. It's a much easier way to make a connection with people. And I just happen to love the topic of aphrodisiacs. I went on to get my master's degree in gastronomy and really studied both the history and psychology of aphrodisiacs there.
Wow.
I am currently getting my nutrition coach certification with ISSA to kind of add the component of a better practice of talking to people about it. Really, you know what I mean? Like more of the how do you, that component of coaching people. But yeah, this is it. I've been doing it now for 20 years.
That's awesome. Amy, I got a kind of an overview question for you. You mentioned the psychology of aphrodisiacs. So how much of this, because we hear sometimes like, throughout time, like, oh, this is Spanish fly, or, oh, eat oysters, or how much of it is, let's say, the psychology around it. Oh, this looks a certain way. This appears to do this, versus the actual nutritional components of it that actually do work on certain pathways versus how much is just NLP? We're programming this to be like sexual, so it is.
We don't actually know. That is the one piece of it. That's the one piece of it that people haven't. There have been some things that try to measure that. I've seen some pretty lame studies on it. It's always assumed.
Yeah.
And if you take, if you look at anecdotal evidence, and if you take your own experience as an example, for sure, there is definitely something to that. I mostly was looking at, I was looking at all of the lame experiments when I was studying it, as well as I was looking at how it was used in pop culture and where those references came up and what they meant and what they might, potentially mean to the population as a whole. So, yeah.
And like, I guess I somewhat of a backtrack question, but I think it feeds into what we're talking about now. Like, prior to you getting sick and having this sort of genesis moment here, did you have like shitty diet and lifestyle habits beforehand? Like, how did you go into this problem first? Because it feels like, I'm curious, like, did you have like a proclivity for healthy eating prior to this happening, or did this sort of all kind of
I did to some degree. However, I always kind of had that, I wouldn't say it was a sugar addiction, but I always really liked sugar and allowed myself to indulge. And of course, that's the first thing that feeds a yeast infection.
Sure.
So, so I was doing things wrong for myself. They wouldn't, if I were perfectly healthy, they would have been fine. And beyond that, yes, I ate all my fruits and veggies and all those things.
Yeah. So that
it's interesting that you're a wine critic, and that's a critical part of wine.
Yeah. And Amy, I'm from right outside of Napa, so like when I grew up, wine is like a condiment at our house. We always used to say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like everywhere.
Yes.
So, when I took my wife wine tasting for the first time, she's like, the hell's wrong with your family? Like, you guys are all like raging alcoholics. Like, no, we're just Napa wine people.
Yeah,
this is pretty
absolutely.
There was a South Park scene about him pouring 6 glasses of wine. They're like, "You're an alcoholic," and he goes, "No, it's a wine tasting, and it's fancy."
Yeah. 100%.
Yep.
So you start getting into this. So what did you start to find when you started to kind of peel back those pop culture references and whatnot? Like Tom said, Spanish Fly. I mean, that's been in about 3,000 songs.
I feel like that was a before our time kind of comment.
Yeah, Spanish Fly was a little before. And by the way, it's dangerous. Don't touch it. Stay away from it. So it's just my PSA.
I can't say that I've ever even been in proximity of it to even be tempted.
Apparently not a fly.
No, it's a beetle. So
beetle.
Yay.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do those things come about? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I got to imagine, to Tom's point earlier, like, there's a little bit of NLP in there that you kind of can build a marketing campaign around, and it just
sure.
Yeah,
I think it was in the 50s. The California Fig Board, or the American Fig Board, something like that, created a brochure that was all about, it was like pictures of figs that were like figs with arms and legs, and figs being sexy and dancing together and seducing each other. Like, what? And yes, figs are aphrodisiac, but I mean, I don't know that that's how you sell people on a fig.
Is it more of the like O'Keeffe painting kind of reference, where it's very visual when they're cut a certain way or something like that? Or
there is. Who was it that had D.H. Lawrence wrote a poem, a very, very naughty poem about figs that was about, describing how you can cut them and use them and look at them. And I think it was D.H. Lawrence. I may be wrong on that. I'm sorry if I am, but yeah. So, I mean, I prefer the Georgia O'Keeffe approach, definitely.
I love that.
Although I think it might be, I think if you're just looking at a Georgia O'Keeffe painting as a painting, it might slip past people that, that's sexual.
Yeah, I have two BFAs and a minor in art history. So like, there's more than a few classes on dissecting the vagina that is Georgia O'Keeffe painting.
Yes.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, I mean, question then, you've been doing it, you said 20 years?
Yeah,
Close. So how has this sort of evolved in 20 years? 20 years ago, my dumb brain is gone. People were like, man, this chick is crazy. And now it's like, now there's like whole weekend retreats that you could probably plan around this thing. So like, have you seen like an explosive change in this?
I've seen more acceptance. So
not on purpose, sorry. Not on purpose. Hey, everybody calm down.
Sorry.
Oh yeah. It's drastically changed. My life is more fun.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's more acceptance. When I started out, I did more interviews and had more features in Europe and Australia.
That makes sense.
In fact, when my first book came out in 2006, the first person who bought a copy was in Australia. So
I feel like we haven't stepped too far from America's puritanical roots, and maybe that speaks to that. But
it's gotten better in the past 20 years. Also, when I started researching, there wasn't a lot of data from a scientific standpoint. I found I was having to look at the nutrition and break it down by what is this food providing. Now there's some solid data on the effects of certain foods on libido and sexual performance and things like that. There just wasn't a lot available. I will say a lot that is available now is garbage. Don't believe it all.
Right. Well, I mean, that's actually a great segue into that. I was going to get to that a little bit later, but like when it comes to this, like, what's our litmus test for bullshit versus not, right? Like, I mean, how do you figure out, I was looking at your site before this, and, you've got things like pineapple and turmeric and stuff. And like, we've seen those things. I mean, I think anybody who's even remotely health conscious has turmeric in their diet at some point, right? Like it just seems to be like
and it's funny because you're using this.
Yeah,
you're using the sex to get other health benefits in there, which I kind of like, to motivate,
right.
Right.
Yeah, and like,
but the thing about, but like turmeric's a great example. So people are promoting the heck out of turmeric these days, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you're not using it correctly, you're not getting any benefit out of it. You're basically just
all right. Well, let's talk about that for 2 seconds. What does using it correctly mean? Give me just for example.
So the curcumin which is the ingredient that is so nutritious in the turmeric, it needs to be activated basically. So you need something that will activate it. And the two things that are most often recommended are pepper, like black pepper, or a fat. So if you're combining it with olive oil or grapeseed oil or avocado oil, great. If you're combining it with black pepper, great. If you're just throwing turmeric into your tea and drinking it, no.
Yeah.
No.
Also, that sounds horrible taste-wise, by the way.
So I went on a brief experiment, which was, I had to stop it, but I get a cow every year and like a full steer, and I get the bones cut up into chunks, and I'd make my own bone broth and I'd put it in these big things. And for a while, a couple winters ago, I was like, you know what? Yeah, it was right when COVID started. It was that winter of COVID. I was like, you know what? To try to stay healthy, I'm going to make bone broth tea. I'm going to put turmeric and black pepper in it, and I'm going to make this every day. And for about 2 or 3 months, I did drink it every day. But finally, I was like, I got to stop. This is fucking gross. Like, I can't. It's like, it's like you were drinking like a pot roast, and I just, I couldn't.
That's exactly what it was soup. It really wasn't tea.
You're saying drinking like a pot roast, and I'm like, that doesn't sound so bad.
It's not that it was bad, but it wasn't like what you want in the morning for your, like, your tea, right? Like,
this is not a wake up.
This is like, I got to drink this
not.
cow again. It's like, too much.
Yeah, maybe more of an end of day. I don't know.
Yeah,
do you guys want to hear?
Brutal, right?
Do you guys want to hear my funny turmeric story?
I mean, we're talking about turmeric for the first time ever.
So this is one of it has all these amazing properties, and it's really well researched, and I'm glad Amy brought it up. One of the things is when you take it as a supplement, right? So you can get a pretty high dose pretty quick. We're actually having his partner Lynn on in a couple of weeks, but there's a doctor named Mark Sivieri. He's a brilliant functional medicine doctor, and he's done everything to himself first, which I have so much respect for. And we were talking about turmeric as a supplement, and he uses this crazy expensive brand. And yeah, it's got the biopyrine, the black pepper in there. And he goes, yeah, I take about 2.5 grams of this a day. And I go, holy shit, that's a lot. And I'm looking at him, and he used to be, so he was number 137 to break the 4-minute mile. So he's built like a runner. I'm like, he's a quarter of my size. I can do that. So the next day I took 2.5 grams of turmeric and immediately had a whole body detox.
Wow.
About a half an hour later, I was sweating. I couldn't get out of the bathroom. I had a headache for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I go, Mark, what did I do wrong? He goes, oh, dude, you got to work up to that.
Yeah.
Did I forget to mention that part? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, that was a critical piece of information that I either missed or was not conveyed.
Yeah.
Wow.
But like I use turmeric for anti-inflammation. So if I run a marathon, I'm big into endurance sports.
Sure.
So if I run a marathon, I'll come back.
Sure.
I have RSO oil. I've got a turmeric tea that I make. Again, with black pepper. I'm doing weird stretches in the hot tub. Like, I mean, I've got a whole sort of detox protocol. But like, when you think about that, you're like, all right, well, if I'm using it as anti-inflammatory, could that help me get a hard-on faster if I had some kind of ED issues going on? Probably. I mean, I can kind of cobble together this thing, but
increase circulation.
Like I can kind of sort of piece together some of this stuff, but like that's only because I have a encyclopedic, thirst for
you have an interest
in that stuff. And like, I've gone down, I mean, I read Boundless, what's his name? Ben Greenfield's Boundless book cover to cover. And that thing is just it's a massive book that has no margins and like 8-point type. Like, this book is dense. Like, it's like,
it is like pretty much like he just spewed up all the information he's ever read.
But there's like a whole section on black pepper and curcumin. And it's like, I don't know anybody who's read all that stuff, right? Like, it's not
right.
And I've had this conversation with dozens and dozens of people. They're like, this makes sense to you only because you just relentlessly talk about it and research it and find, and now we've got the show where we're talking to people like you who can bring us new vantage points and stuff. And I'll leave here with a whole new set of information, right? But like, for the average Joe public, they want the silver bullet, right? So like, they're like, hey, I want to have better sex. Do I just need a tablespoon of turmeric mixed with a chunk of pineapple and like we're off to the races? Like, and so they're going to get garbage shit everywhere all over the internet. Like, so I guess, how do you sort of weed that out? Like, what is it? Just same thing, research, and you just kind of figure it out, or are there sort of other strategies?
Yeah, I mean, it's just research, talking to people who are authorities in certain, niches, and then I try to take the information. So the latest thing that I've been doing is trying to take that information and make it more functional for people, I guess. Right now I have Eat Something Sexy, the website, and it's got 1,000 pages of information, maybe 1,000 posts and pages. And it's not necessarily that easy to get from point A to point B. You can find, you want to know about pineapple, you'll find the information about pineapple, but you won't know how to put together, well, how am I going to apply all of this? So I have my latest book. Well, it's actually a whole suite of products. It's called the Better Sex Bundle for Men. And the whole idea with that was taking it down to, here are 10 foods that are great for men. This is why they're all great for men. And they aren't necessarily the only foods that are great for men, right? But they're 10 because that's an easy amount
to digestible take in. For people. Yeah.
And then I break down, well, here are the other things you need to think about. Are you taking medications? Does that change how you feel? Are you finding romance? Are you connecting with your partner? Are you sleeping? Are you exercising? How much are you exercising? Do you have a better libido when you do exercise? All of these things.
More of a holistic approach to it.
Yeah. But I'm trying to take it into something that's, obviously you can't make a magic bullet without handing someone like a pill or something. And I'm not going to do that because it's never going to be effective or sustainable. But to take it into the smallest, most bite-sized, here are things that are going to have a big impact. But you do have to do and I'm trying to make it easy for them to do the work. I have a journal that's just like check boxes.
I love that.
How did I exercise? Check. Did I, whatever. How'd I feel this week? Just like a one line, so that you can kind of see what works for you, and you're going to be a lot more motivated to do it if you see what works.
Yeah. Good. Doug.
Oh, I was going to say, you mentioned specifically for men. How much of this overlap is there? Like, is there a big overlap for men and women? Are there things that are specific for women versus men? And if you're putting together, like, say in your cookbook, do you have like two different dishes?
Yeah.
Like, are you serving
I do
two
talk
different
about
meals?
that,
Okay.
No, you do not need to serve two different meals. The women are going to benefit from so on eatsomething.sexy.com, we do have the list of the 10 best foods for men and the list of the 10 best foods for women. And everyone's going to benefit from eating the foods on either list, assuming you don't have any allergies or intolerances.
Sure.
But mostly because they're highly nutritious, natural foods. We just identified some are particularly beneficial to women's hormones or, whatever it is. And that's why they're in there. Men need more protein. So there was a little more focus on the men's list, so things like that. It is drastically different in terms of how your body's working and how food may work for you for women than for men. I haven't released the Better Sex Bundle for women yet because it's so much more complex.
Interesting.
That I'm really taking my time and trying to make sure.
That sounds on track.
What are you trying to say?
Yeah.
To be honest.
Okay, let's think about it.
Yeah, we would assume that. Yeah.
But wait, a man wakes up and his hormone cycle is pretty much the same every single day. Every day. A woman wakes up and it's different every single day.
Sure.
Until, it's like each day of the month is something, you can, 1 month later, you're going to feel exactly the same way as today until you get pregnant. And then it all goes out the window.
Right.
And then, and then you get back into that cycle and then you hit perimenopause and then it changes again in menopause and then it changes post-menopause. So for women, it's so much more complex. And it's funny because we talk much more about the sexual issues that men have, particularly with sexual function, than we do about women. But in truth, we probably have a lot more problems than men do.
That's an interesting observation. That is absolutely true. And I've never thought to ask why. I mean, I'm not beating my chest here. I don't have sexual dysfunction. So it's like a topic I generally just don't pay a ton of attention to in general.
Yeah.
But like every commercial is about penis drugs,
Viagra, Cialis, the blue pill, the purple pill,
and even though that he's holding her hand in a bathtub on a bluff, like you're still sort of like, this is a commercial about him, not her, right? Like, and it's sort of like, why is that? I'm sure that's an interesting observation.
I think that's a bias that goes well beyond just sex.
Totally.
I mean, disparities in healthcare and even looking at every study being based off of the average white male is kind of sad,
Well, as long as the average white male can get a hard on, I guess the world's.
I mean, honestly,
apparently that's all that matters.
Then the country still runs, right?
That's all we need, right? So, of that list, and I didn't see that. I wish I had, but like, what of that list? How many of those top 10 cross over from one to the other? Are they two totally?
They're completely separate.
I gotcha.
Lists.
Okay, cool.
I think it'd be confusing. I mean, there are ingredients we could have put on both, but I felt like that would be confusing.
Interesting.
So
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense though.
So, I guess this is going to be a harder answer for the female side of this equation, but like so many other things, and you talked about it with mold. Getting over a mold problem is usually a lengthy process, right? It's not a one and done.
Years,
exactly.
Right.
And you see adrenal fatigue's another one. Like it takes forever to get past it, right? So and
the comorbidities of those, the number of people that have both are exponential, right? Once you get one chronic infection, you're kind of doomed for a little like fatigue, then like other infections can get in much easier as well. Oh, sorry, I kind of railroaded that one.
No, but so when you're explaining this to people, especially people for the first time, right? When you're getting somebody new, is there sort of a period where you have to say, "Hey, look, this is a thing, but it's not a quick thing. Like it's not like because I've got to imagine I'm not going to cook a dinner and all of a sudden have a raging hard on and have sex all night. Like I'm not like that's probably not how this goes, right? This
Well, I do approach aphrodisiacs. And in fact, I wrote a cookbook called Romancing the Stove that approached aphrodisiac
that
You are quite the wordsmith, Amy. I have to tell you.
I just gotta say, like,
but I approach aphrodisiacs for like, hey, what do you want to get? You know, the recipe sections are, what do you want to get out of it? So one is like aphrodisiac ingredients for a dinner, a seductive meal. And it includes things like chili peppers, which raise your body temperature and make you feel like tearing off your clothes and those kind of things, or maybe a little bit of coffee at the end of the meal to give you that little spike of energy, as well as it enhances mood a little bit. So I did some of that, and then I did a section on, here are recipes if you want to start eating for a better libido. And here are, so so I approached it that way because there are different things that you can get out of eating different aphrodisiac foods or aphrodisiac recipes.
So more of like a long game versus short game kind of.
Yeah.
And I did find him on your site. Actually, I was curious while you were just talking. I'm like, oh, and I love that your bonus ingredient for both is wine, because
that's true. There is an overlap on the men's and women's list. Yes, a little bit of wine will certainly help your sex life.
Right. But so when I'm looking at the list of foods, I mean, I eat most of both of these lists on a weekly basis at a minimum, but like some of them are daily, right? And
yes.
And so like in general, I mean, is this something, and I think you answered it in the sense that it kind of depends on what you want to get out of it. But overall, I mean, is the foundation of this just building a healthier sort of food intake, and the sex will follow along kind of thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, I do focus on, hey, these are some ingredients that if you're missing these nutrients that are essential to your sex life here, these ingredients are certainly going to get you there a little faster than other things. But absolutely, it's really about eating tasty, delicious, whole foods for the most part.
Yeah, I know. And that's like the best medicine for literally every disease or dysfunction out there, right? It's like, it all comes down to a buddy of mine, very healthy guy, no acute problems whatsoever. But once a year goes on a, dry January thing, but he doesn't do it in January all the time. He kind of, whenever he feels motivated, he does it. But a buddy of his got bile duct cancer. It was like this crazy. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
And the doctor said basically you got to go on this like ketogenic diet, essentially, like to try to, like during chemo, you got to like cut out all sugar and everything like that, right? And so he's like, well, you know what? I'll do that too. Now, keep in mind, this is like an otherwise healthy guy, and he didn't have cancer. His friend did. So it wasn't even like somebody was saying something to him. Cut out sugar, and 30 days later, he goes, dude, I don't think I could ever eat sugar again.
Wow.
He goes, I wasn't looking to solve a problem. I didn't have an issue to solve. Then he cut out gluten for the second month, gluten and sugar.
Ooh, I really like gluten.
I know.
That would be hard.
Gluten is delicious, but and it seems to be a thing. This is the weird thing where people go to Italy, they go to Japan, and they eat bread, and there's no issue, right? And then they come here, and it's part of the way we hybridized the gluten, and post 1950s, I think we have more gluten in our wheat than any other country on the planet.
But I make sourdough bread, which is essentially just a ball of gluten, and you're looking for a high gluten.
It's something about it's something about the yeast that sourdough yeast that actually kind of breaks it down and makes it more tolerable for people, because we eat it and we're quote unquote gluten free in the house.
Right. Well, he said basically after 60 days of no sugar and 30 days of no gluten or sugar, he's like, I can't. I mean, I don't know that I can physically go back to it, because it would be irresponsible of me to go back, because I'm just basically volunteering to have all the thing. He goes, I lost a couple pounds, which was great because I hadn't lost weight in years, but he's already a healthy guy. He goes, but man, I have less brain fog. My energy's through the fucking roof. I'm having sex like I'm like an 18-year-old. Like I'm like all these things. He just kept going down the list. He's like, it kind of doesn't make sense. And when you look at that on a broader scale, you're like, he didn't do anything except for cut out like these two things that were apparently having a bigger effect on him than he ever gave them credit for.
But and what's interesting is that's not necessarily the next person. Someone could hear this and try it and not at all have the
right,
same.
Yeah.
But we're big experimenters here. We say
Great.
N of one probably at least 30 times a show. And I'm surprised that we've gotten 29 minutes in and not said it.
Look, man, we haven't said AI.
We're
halfway through. We haven't said AI or mentioned psychedelics.
Yeah, or psychedelics. Which
is almost a record until I just messed it up.
We could.
So actually, you know what? We don't have to directly mention psychedelics, but that's more, I think when you talk about psychedelics with sexual therapy, I think it's more of an experiential situation, which I kind of feel is the exact same thing with this. Let's shift gears over to the experience side. Like, how much of this is just doing it with a partner, like not doing it in sex, but like cooking and you know, shucking corn.
The bonding part of it,
shucking
the
corn
connection.
is sort of a weirdly sexual thing, you know, like, you know, I mean.
Right, yeah. Creating that intimacy, getting into sort of this rhythm together while cooking together, I always recommend that. And even if, you know, I've had people say to me, well, my partner does not cook. That doesn't work for me. I'm like, well, then ask them to come sit in the kitchen with you while you cook.
Yeah.
And then ask them to shuck some ears of corn. And then ask them to take the pot off the stove. Just ask them to do the little things. They're not cooking, but they are.
Sure.
And, you know, that can help open those doors of intimacy as well. Now, although I'm picturing my husband, if I asked him to come sit in the kitchen with me, I'm trying to play devil's advocate on this one, he would probably sit there on his phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the attentiveness, right? It's the paying attention to the other person that it goes
put our phones away. Let's turn on some music and come sit with me while I cook. Well, I'm trapped in the kitchen. Come, you know, make it nicer for me.
And you know what?
So they feel like they're doing a service for you.
For sure.
You know?
Do you have kids?
I do.
Yeah. And so I have kids as well. Tom does too.
That is the biggest erection killer on the
planet. That also true. Not where I was going.
No better form of birth control than already having kids.
But like presence is something I am struggling every day to teach my kids.
I feel like I just got off the phone with my social worker about not being present.
Right. I just and I you know, you touch on. Without me, I mean, I'm sure if somebody was paying you to coach them or something, like you'd get into presence a lot more, but we don't talk about presence a whole lot as adults. But reality is that's also a cure for just about every problem that we have societally.
It certainly helps.
You know, like it's like, well, wait a minute. All I have to do, even when I'm on here, right? About a year or two ago, I just got into a habit of putting my phone face down. Like I'm not going to have it here.
Oh, yeah.
But I just, you know, we always put our phone face up. It's just like it's like a habit.
So I get that little alert when I see the alert.
I look at people now.
Oh, it's so funny. I've always put my phone face down. I didn't even realize that was a thing.
So I started looking at what people do when they put their phones down. And I'm going to tell you, almost everybody puts it screen up.
Screen up, yeah.
And it's such a fascinating thing because it's an unconscious thing that happens so fluidly that there's no recollection of it. If you ask them, did you put it up or down? Like they don't even know. Half the time people don't even know that they put it down. They're just putting it down because like they're going to sit in a chair and they put it on the table next to them, or they're sitting on a couch, they put it next to them. But my kids do this, and we've had this tradition in our house for years where we watch these old shows that we watched when we were in our 20s, you know, like, so we watched Psych was the first one. It was a great show and kids loved it. And we've watched 20, 30 shows now, like through the whole thing. But as they got older and the phones were in their hand, they will hold it on their lap like a security blanket.
Wow.
Security blanket.
And then when I say, hey guys, put the phone down, they will put it down. They'll put it down face up. And now I have this new knowledge. I say, guys, phones down. Like and then I'll just let it run. It does not take 5 minutes before they have it back in their hand. They don't even know they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so when I try to tell them, I'm like, guys, just be present watching this show, because even though this is also a distraction, you're now double distracting. And we make fun of the shows. Like it creates dialogue with us. We try to see who can solve the mystery the fastest. Like there is interaction during the show, but that interaction goes way down if everyone's on their phones. And I'm not into it at all. But like to your point, like if my wife walked into the kitchen with me, it was like on her phone while we were trying to cook dinner, even if it wasn't sexy dinner, I'd be like, yo, this is not working. You need to.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of my way.
Just go in there. I'll make your mac and cheese later. Get the fuck out of my kitchen. Like, I mean, like, I just, I want my time now.
By the way, I have two cell phones. One, my business line is on one phone. And anyway, the phone for my business line, I got something fairly inexpensive because I just use it for calls. So, I have this Motorola phone and you can't sit it face up. If you sit it face up on any surface, it slides off onto the ground.
Oh, that's funny.
So you might want to look into that.
Yeah. Oh my God. We bought my son a flip phone because he screwed it. He got caught using his phone in school. So we're like, you know what, dude? Here you go. We gave him a flip phone. It's like one of those like burner phone type things. And it's literally like, he's got to text us and it's like, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that's painful.
1, 2,
yeah, the little.
My God.
He hates it. It's torture.
We actually, my son turned 12 this week. We got him a watch.
Oh, nice.
That's we don't need phones, but yeah, you're ready. So he's getting the watch this weekend.
See, my son's 2.5 years older than my daughter. So my daughter got his iPhone 12 when she was 10 because he got a better phone, and we're all in advertising here, so I've got like 8 phones that I'm not using, that are old. But even like when I'm talking about running, like I'll take my kids, we have a neighborhood 5K, and it's like they want to have headphones in. And I'm like, look, I get it. Everybody likes to do that, and I don't. I've done 26 marathons and 7 Ironman without headphones, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's like I can't be present in that activity. And there's a lot of reasons you want to be present. Self-meditation, self-reflection, environmental awareness for dangers. These are all 3.
Well, for me, that would be the reason to not have headphones. But otherwise, that's the kind of activity where I want to disassociate because all I will think about is the pain. So I can.
But that's helpful information too, right? Like working through your own acknowledgement of pain. I got a cold pod for Christmas, and Tom keeps making fun of me because I won't use the damn thing because I'm too much of a wuss to jump in a vat of freezing cold water. Tom does it at his clinic, and he's inside. He's like, "You're such an asshole! Like, just jump in the water for God's sake."
Well, look, man, I gotta say, like, I've got all these toys at the office. It's probably been a few months since I've used any of them. We've been so damn busy, but like the cold plunge, I get upset. And Matt and I have talked about this before. This like biohacking movement started out so good, and then it became just like this douchebag white guy thing, and it's like, no, you don't understand. I got little old ladies going in my cryo and they don't flinch. And I got a 20-something-year-old hothead that thinks he's tough, shivering and complaining and going, how much longer? And it's like, you got to make peace with that, man. Look, this is a little bit of suffering for a better outcome. And that's where you look. It's going to be cold. Acknowledge that. You can't fight the elements.
It's
man.
in the name, dude.
Just tell them it's good for your sex life.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
It is.
It's good for your sex life.
I just read an article on that the other day. I didn't even think of that, but apparently it is really good for your sex life.
Of course.
Anything that's gonna and I love the fact that we had this whole conversation about presence, right? Because that's that's really what even cooking is, right? And choosing the right foods, right? I have the mindset going in. That I need to pay attention to what's happening. Like, what am I putting in the pot? What am I putting in my body? And who am I sharing that with?
Yeah. And you also, when you're cooking, I mean, you have to be very conscious of sounds and smells because things go wrong. And those are the signals.
Burning. Burning will kill the mood real fast, too.
Burning, sizzling. There are sounds that you just don't want to hear.
You don't want to. Okay. So in your sort of ideal, I mean, what's your favorite? I'm just curious, like what is, like, if you were like, hey, there's one thing, one and only one thing, like, what's your gold standard sort of setup? Like, is there such a thing for you?
Do you mean like for
just
a
for
romantic dinner or a food?
No, like I guess a meal, a process of food to sort of kind of get things rolling in the right direction. Like, is there sort of like a go-to you have that you tell people or for yourself?
I do. Yeah. It's funny because it's one that doesn't work in my house.
Okay,
but it has worked for me in the past, and it has worked for so many people that I've suggested this to, which is to make sushi together.
Oh, interesting.
And it doesn't have to be good sushi. You know, you don't have to get the vinegared rice quite right. It's all okay. It's all okay. It doesn't have to be pretty. But making sushi together, it's great. I mean, it's a lighter meal in general, right? It's got so many ingredients that are good for your sex life in it, and starting with the seaweed.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's something where you have to work together, and, you know, you can either make it a competition if you want, because that works for some people.
Yeah. I can see that.
Who makes the better sushi roll or the more creative sushi roll or whatever it is, or you can actually physically do it together. I mean, you can physically roll the sushi together if that's how it works for you. It's a great one.
That's actually a really cool idea.
And then you get to enjoy a delicious meal.
Yeah.
I don't know. In my head, it sounds like a Japanese version of the movie Ghost.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
Endless unchained melody in the background,
you
know?
Definitely.
I like the idea of the rolling it, because I've made sushi before, and that shit can go wrong real fast. Like you could really fuck up a roll. Like, I mean, it falls apart like completely, but it's funny.
It really just eat it with a fork.
No, I know, but then it becomes funny, right? Like then you're like,
now a sushi bowl.
Yeah, this thing is
yes, it's a sushi bowl.
Yeah.
Delightful.
But there is something weirdly sort of, I can see how it could be a little erotic, like slicing the fish, and like there's like a little bit of there's some visual to
the rawness of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, it's a sensual activity. There are tactile sensations. There are visual sensations. It's not just about being hungry.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
It's going to be a little weird when I go into the next sushi bar and I'm eyeing up the chef.
yeah, right.
He's gonna be like, "Why's that guy looking at me like that?" I don't know, man. That's pretty hot.
So, like along those lines, pop culture wise, like, you know, whipped cream on naked bodies and chocolate syrup and stuff. Are these just sort of like fun toys?
Oh, and there's even naked sushi. Let's not forget that one.
Yes, you're right. I mean, are these sort of just like fun games type things, or are there any sort of like science behind that kind of stuff too, or is that just kind of fun at that point?
No, aside from the, supposedly woman's body although that's just crazy because everybody has a different body temperature. The supposedly you put the sushi on a woman because her body temperature makes the sushi the perfect temperature for eating, which I think it's just that someone came up with a really good excuse to put sushi on a lady.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the motivation of the guy who came up with that pseudoscience.
Yeah.
He had something else on his mind for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's really funny. Yeah. So okay.
It's all just fun.
It's just fun. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then the molecular gastronomy, we didn't touch on that too much, but like that is certainly much more of the scientific side of food. Is there sort of any sort of ratcheting up of this experience when you get into the gastro side, or?
So not a fan. I mean, it's fine. Like it can be a really fun gastronomic experience, right? It's really interesting, but most of the things that you're using to manipulate the foods are chemicals.
Yeah.
So it kind of takes you a few steps back from where I'm going.
I gotcha.
That being said, the part of it that can be very effective is that it's very sensual. It invokes many senses. There are usually multiple textures in each dish. There are sometimes multiple temperatures in a dish. So it's exciting to your senses. It's very, it can be very sensual, and that definitely could be a turn on for someone. Yeah.
I almost feel like, though, I've seen people cooking gastro, and it's like a lot of steps a lot of times, and there's like a specificity to it that if you get it wrong,
it almost looks more like a lab than an actual
so
kitchen.
I would not recommend, if you're planning a romantic dinner, I would not plan to do this, molecular meal for someone.
Right.
Go out for
I
that
was just
meal.
going to say, have somebody else cook that.
Yeah. Yes. That is one thing I always recommend. If you are planning a romantic meal, you want to keep it simple. This is not the time to show off your greatest hits, your greatest gastronomic hits. It is, make a simple meal because you don't want to be sweaty and tired and stressed out and like worried about the timing of something when you're supposed to be seducing someone. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. I've worked in several kitchens when I was in high school and college, and I mean, I'm a decent
stress-inducing.
I'm a decent cook because of it. Like I know my way around. I got crazy knife skills. I know a lot about prep work of Greek to Italian to American, but I only know one way to cook. It's fucking 8,000 miles an hour, and you're timing 12 dishes, and I can get it all to land on the plate hot at the same time. I'm like very proficient at that, but it's not sexy. It's like, it's delicious, but it ain't sexy. Like it's not.
Okay. So for you, then you plan a meal around takeout that you're going to bring home and plate beautifully.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Right. That's where you
go.
No,
that makes total sense. And I'm just lazy. As the older I get, we used to do this like 19 course, like Friendsgiving where there was just, it was like everything, but how many, it just gets exhausting, and now I'm like, hey man, how about we just come over, we'll crack like 8-9 bottles of wine and we'll just,
it doesn't matter what you're eating.
I for the past 3 years, I have refused to make a turkey. I'm like, all you want are the sides anyway. Yeah. The turkey's bad for the planet. So we're just,
and the turkey kind of sucks most of the time. Plus, Mike,
can I ask? Is there an Instant Pot sexy dish?
That would be awesome.
Sure. I mean, so absolutely. If you're gonna cook, if you find an aphrodisiac recipe that would work in an Instant Pot, sure. The only problem that I can see with that is that Instant Pot dishes lack texture.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, they sort of become one.
It's all a kind of uniform texture.
If baby food turns you on, and that would be the only problem.
All right, I don't even want to go down that avenue.
To it. No.
I was like,
nobody search that. Nobody Google that.
No, you'll get on a list.
Yeah, you're going to get on a list.
You definitely will. Kicking in your door.
Immediately cleared after that search. You're like, nope, take this off the list. That's really funny. So when is the woman book list coming out? Like, what do you got on the radar here for us? Like,
okay, so the women's list is available on eatsomethingsexy.com, so you can check out those 10 foods. As for the book,
the book,
and the whole program, so the Better Sex Bundle for Women, I am hopeful it is coming out this summer. I ran into so many questions and I want to make sure I get the best answers. Sure.
That's good.
It was originally, it had a release date in April and I went, no, I need more.
So you're going to break this book down in those sections you were talking about earlier? Like, okay, got it.
Yes.
So
and for women, it has to be broken down even more than for men because there are so many.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you have a chapter on perimenopause food and a chapter on post-menopause food.
Well, not necessarily a chapter, but at least explaining.
Yeah, an acknowledgement.
An acknowledgement and suggestions and management.
And honestly, I'm fascinated by that too, because I think one of the most exciting pieces of health in the sort of post-biohacker world has been in the acknowledgement and study of the nuance of the female biology, right? Like we have a lot of, my wife is, in her mid 40s and like has gotten extremely literate in hormone balance, imbalance, treatments, causes, symptoms. And she has been making fun of me for this curiosity for 20 years. And so,
once it affects you,
right. All of a sudden,
then you have a vested interest. And I think this is one of those things where even woman to woman, the uniqueness of that, right? I've had some women come in their early 30s and they're like, look, I'm perimenopausal. And then I have a woman that's in her 50s and she's like, my cycle's clockwork.
Yeah.
So you have to respect that. And you almost have to use the person's own innate knowledge and what they've done to themselves as the starting point before you do anything else.
And the hard part is most of us aren't conscious of it. I think the first step is becoming conscious. And that's my goal with this book. Let's become conscious. And once you are, here are some suggestions and here are additional resources. Yeah.
But it's that presence thing again, right? My wife is only present for this research because it's having an effect on her immediate life. Like when you're not, when you're not in it, or if you just get into a dinner conversation about it, I could be present for a 20-minute conversation-ish, but I could also be checking my email while we're having that conversation and sort of like be checking out too, but if I'm like trying to get somewhere with it, and I like your approach about like, what are you trying to get out of this? Are you just hungry or do you want to like really take it to a different place? Right. Like you got two different motivations here, Cool. Well, is there anything sort of we didn't touch, I guess, is a question. I mean, I love that you're paying attention to this, and I actually can't wait to try some of these things. So I was
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I've been looking at the website talking about presents, unfortunately, but I'm like, yeah, I would totally eat all that. That sounds amazing.
It's funny. At one point, I got to tell you, at one point while I was talking, both of you were looking away, and I was like, "What are they doing?" And then one of you mentioned, "Oh, I'm looking at your website right now," and I was like, "You are not present."
It was in service of trying to ask to find out what it was because I was curious and I didn't want to have you stop and like explain the list, but I was like,
yeah.
I mean, are we talking? I just wanted to kind of know, like, and I don't know how I didn't see that before, but mostly what I was curious about was, is it like Eye of Newton and, or was it like stuff I have hanging around my house? And
so what you're going to need is a ground up rhino horn.
Exactly.
Oh, no, don't even.
Yeah. And a shark fin. Don't forget about that.
No.
How many tigers can you murder for this recipe?
Okay. Cartilage and keratin are not aphrodisiacs, so nobody eat any horns, teeth, fins, nothing, please.
How the hell did that come up, by the way? Do you know in your research, have you figured any of that out? Tom might know.
No.
I have. So there's a concept in Chinese medicine and a lot of traditional practices. They call it the law of signature, right? So if something is shaped a certain way, if something like beans, right? We like, especially black beans, because black is the color of the kidneys. We say, oh, these things are good for the kidneys.
Yeah.
Right. Or a property, like this is where life comes out of, right? We know we plant this and it grows. So that's our source. That's our essence. But things like tiger bone, oh, well, tigers are fierce and they're strong and that'll fortify that. And for lack of a better term, like rhino horns are shaped like a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Like and go to any traditional practice anywhere on the planet. If it looks like a dick, like ginseng, they call that man root because it often looks like a person.
Yes.
And then
avocado is the testicle tree.
The testicle tree. Yeah.
And that's actually, that was the Spanish butchering that word.
Yeah.
So they thought it sounded like abogado, like a lawyer. And they're like, no, that's how we say scrotum.
That's funny. And I guess that all makes for a better story than saying eat more basil because it's got health. Yeah, like that's not quite as exotic.
Well, but like, to kind of the question I and Amy was super honest with this, like how much of that is the head game, right? Like, Matt, when Curio launched their golden strawberry as their weed strain, I'm like, I'm fucking buying that.
Sure.
And oh yeah, it worked. And like, how much did it work? Or like, now when we smoke it, my wife's like, oh, you're trying to fuck me now. I'm like, I actually like the strain, but I'm not saying I don't.
Now they sell like CBD or THC for clitoral massage.
Yes.
Like creams and everything.
Yes, I actually someone sent me a sample. It's sitting right here.
That's funny. Yeah, I think, it's funny. I have a business, headshop.com. We sell cannabis accessories and we sell that thing and people and a bunch of different versions of it. And the stories that come in on that are like so wildly polar, right? Like some people are like, I want my money back.
Love it or hate it.
It's, or people are like, this is crazy. And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, if you think it's going to work and that gets you to the finish line.
Exactly. Good for you. Yes.
Like, I mean, but it's no different than people that cure a disease with a placebo pill on a blind trial either.
Right.
It's still gone.
Still, look, you still are psyched because you don't have the thing anymore. Yeah. So like, I mean, who cares?
Yeah. I mean, at least with food, the things that I'm telling you are going to benefit you no matter what.
Right. Worst case scenario. Yeah. I told, I take Nutrafol because my hair was like falling out and I was like super stressed out and everything.
Amy, do not take Nutrafol.
Well, neither do I. So we have that in common.
But here's the thing. I was looking at the ingredient list and I'm like, even if this thing doesn't do a single thing for your hair, which I'm convinced it might not, actually, I'm not a big believer in it, but it's got like marine kelp and some collagen and all this other stuff. I'm like, I'm just going to keep taking it because best case scenario does help with hair health, but worst case scenario, it's actually got a bunch of cool phytochemicals and some antioxidants. Right. I'm like, well, shit. I mean, this isn't bad anyway. I mean,
you're not getting them in your diet per se. You'll get them this way.
So it's like, okay, so what's the worst? I mean, it's a little spendy, but it's otherwise it's what's the worst that's going to happen? I mean, it's not going to kill me.
It's funny. My hairstylist and I both concluded he spends a week or 2 weeks every year doing a residency at some hotel in Hawaii. And he and I both concluded that spending several days just swimming in the ocean is great for your hair. Like just all the marine plants. Clearly, there's something that's just great for your hair. So
I love it.
Yeah,
it's the best conditioner. We all come at when we go out to a beach or something. My kids are even like, my hair feels amazing.
When I was lifeguarding, I had amazing hair.
Yeah, obviously, it's been a minute since you.
Wait, well then that means you had to do a lot of saving people because most of the lifeguards I see never touch the water.
No.
Yeah, like I was in the water 0 times last year. I've been a lifeguard for 5 years.
No, we just it was a bay. It was rocky.
Oh man.
No one swam.
All right, so Amy, where are we sending people? How do we want to leave people? Where do we?
All right.
Yeah, what do we do?
Well, you can find out more about all of it at eatsomething.sexy.com. Be sure to check out the Better Sex Bundle for men.
Yes.
Even if you're a woman and your partner is a man, you will benefit from it just as much as if you are a man. So check it out.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, the site is very interesting. There's a lot of stuff on there, so I did find it. I think part of the reason,
can tell you put some work.
There's
into
a lot of data on that site, which is cool.
The site has been around since 2002.
Oh wow!
So
wow,
yeah,
that's crazy.
There's a lot. Yeah.
So do you just keep dumping new stuff on there all the time? Is that sort of your repository, like you send clients?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. It's pretty dense. And I think the reason I didn't get to your list, because you get to the first pull down menu, you start going, what is aphrodisiac food? And you start like kind of going through that.
Yeah.
Then I'm down like 19 Google vortexes, like, let me look that up. So there's a ton of great information.
And that's why I created the Better Sex Bundle for men, because I realize people are coming and they get sucked into something, but they don't ever get the plan.
Yeah.
So now I've got the plan. Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. Amy, thank you so much for coming. It was very cool talking to you. I love what you're doing. And
thank you so much. This was
a great
fun.
conversation.
Yeah, and we don't talk about food a lot. We talk about a lot of other shit, like devices I can buy to put on my head, or therapies I can do, or supplements I can take. But funny, the easiest thing in the world, we just don't talk about that much, right? It's like, just eat better. I mean,
yeah.
Well, I think to Amy's niche, it's like you make it sexy and people will listen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, guys, have a great weekend, and thanks again, Amy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.